Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabella. Hey, Toby, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Are you on mute?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I can hear you, Jordan. Good. Hi there.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Okay.
Okay.
Do you know if Bob is going to show up tonight?
I think he is.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe I should call him and remind him.
Okay. Thanks. If you want one of these, you're welcome.
Hi, are you going to join Pende's special insight discussion tonight? It's taking place. It's just starting. Do you want to join? Did you get a link? Yeah, we're just starting right now. I can send you the link. Okay. Bye.
I'm glad you called, Toby. Seems like
He
you
said
didn't.
he didn't realize.
Okay.
Let's see now, how will I do this? Anyway,
Do you know his email? I could help you and forward the email that I have.
I'm just sending it right now, trying to, I'm not so good at these things, but yeah, I'm
Let
going
me
to
know.
forward this to him right now.
Perfect. If I can help, let me know.
Okay, everyone.
It's interesting. It has a it's different.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Also, my mouth looks crooked for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's.
I can verify it's not.
It's not okay. Thanks.
I sent it.
Okay.
I'm going to text him that I sent it.
Good.
Okay.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Bob. You need to tilt your computer so we get your whole face.
Well, that's easier said than done. So
Ah, Okay.
Hold on, I can do something here. That's as good as it's getting.
Fair enough. Okay, good. Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope over the last, I guess it's been about 6 weeks that we've had a break between the last session and this session. So I hope everything's been going well with everybody. And that where we left off, you had some, at least not a worse ability to meditate on emptiness. So we're going to be starting with chapter 18 in the inside section of the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, volume 3. So this section, like from chapter 18 through 21, it's all about distinguishing the Prasangika system of the Madhyamika philosophy with the Svatantrika system of Madhyamika. And the Chandrakirti is regarded by the tradition as the person who has made this particular distinction. And he did it because of a commentary that Bhava Viveka wrote on commenting on Nagarjuna's great treatise on the Middle Way. And within that treatise by Bhava Viveka, he criticized a commentary that another scholar by the name of Buddhapalita had done when he made his own commentary to the Nagarjuna's treatise on the Middle Way. And when Buddhapalita, in his commentary to Nagarjuna's classic text, he used consequences in order to both refute what he regarded as wrong views and also to establish the correct view. And so I want to talk a little bit about what consequences are and what syllogisms are, because that subject comes up. And, just to remind you, if you're not familiar with it. So a syllogism is basically, it has 3 parts, A, B, and C. A is the subject, B is the predicate, predicated on that subject, and C is the reason to prove that that is the case, that B is a quality or an attribute of A, the subject. So you have these 3 parts: subject, predicate, and reason. Okay, so the subject and predicate together there's 2 names for it. One is the thesis. So for instance, sound is impermanent because it's a product. So sound is the subject, impermanent is the predicate, and product is the reason. Sound is impermanent is the thesis. And it's also called the probandum, another fancy name. So it has 2 different technical terms to describe that what you're trying to prove. So in my example, sound is impermanent. And then the reason is because it's, in my example, because it's a product. What is it? Sound, because sound is a product. Now, so is that clear, those 3 parts? Okay, so yes.
What was the other word you said other than
Probandum. Probandum.
probandum? Thank you.
Yeah.
And that is both subject and predicate.
together, yet. Just,
Thank
and it's an alternative term to thesis.
Thank you.
And probandum just means that which is to be proved.
Right.
Okay. So, and then the reason, in order to be a valid reason, to succeed in proving the thesis, it has to satisfy three conditions. So the three in this text, there's the three, I don't know, I forgot exactly what they used. When I first learned this, it's Tsul Sum in Tibetan, and that was the three modes. But in this text, it's like the three criteria. That's it, the three criteria. So a reason to be a valid reason establishing the thesis, it has to satisfy three criteria. The first of the three criteria is that the reason is a property of the subject. So that it is already that it's a property of the subject. The second criteria is that the reason has to be pervaded by the predicate. That is, so in my example, for the first criteria, in order for product to be a valid reason in the proof of sound is impermanent, that sound has to be a product. Then the second criteria is what they're referred to as the forward pervasion. And that is that whatever is a product is necessarily impermanent. So the reason is pervaded by the predicate. If you're familiar with the Zen diagram, then one way to look at it would be the predicate is a large circle and the reason is a smaller circle inside the larger circle. So that reason, C, is pervaded by B. Whatever is C is necessarily B, right? Okay, in my example, whatever is a product is necessarily impermanent. And then the third criteria is what's called the reverse pervasion. And that is whatever is not the predicate is not the reason. So in my example, whatever is not impermanent is not a product. Okay, so those are the three parts of a syllogism and the three criteria to establish a reason as being valid in proving the thesis of the syllogism. And there's another part that you can add to this, that when you're proving your thesis, you would use an example. And the example would be something that the forward pervasion and reverse pervasion can be established on. Like, so you could say sound is impermanent because it's a product, just like a clay vase. So whatever is a clay vase, clay vases are you can establish the reason on that. So you can just say, like, whatever is a product is necessarily impermanent, like a clay vase. Okay. Now, in order for the reason to work, not only does it have to have all three criteria, but the person that you're presenting this to, let's call that person the opponent. And let's call yourself, who's trying to prove the thesis, the proponent. Okay, so the opponent has to know what the subject is, know what the predicate is, know what the reason is, and then also know the three criteria are established, have established in their mind. And all of this should be established by valid cognition. Okay? So when you're and so that means that the opponent would have to already know that all products are impermanent, and they would know that on the basis of something else, like a clay cup. And so then when you use the reason in the case of and also the opponent has to have a doubt in their mind of whether or not sound is impermanent, right? Otherwise, there'd be no point in trying to prove it if they already knew it, right? So they have to have a doubt. So they know that clay cups are impermanent because they're products, but they're having a doubt about sound. And so there might be some philosophical position that has, some strange view about sound, like sound is a quality of space, something like this, which actually is a point of view in some ancient Indian philosophical system. So they have a doubt whether sound is impermanent or not. And you would say, well, sound is impermanent because it's a product. All products are impermanent, like a clay cup. And they go, oh, and suddenly, eureka, they get it. Okay. Now, a consequence is a little bit different from a syllogism. Okay. A consequence is where it's like, if this is the case, then it follows that that is the case. Like the term "it follows" is usually indicative in English of a consequence. And so you can actually use that kind of language with all the parts of a syllogism. But you would start off by saying, it follows that sound is impermanent because it's a product, like that. So that's where a consequence looks just like a syllogism. However, consequences are often used to create a doubt in the opponent's mind, because they might be really solidly of the belief that sound is permanent, right? And so if they are of that belief, then you need to create a doubt in their mind. And so consequences are used for that. So you would say, well, you believe that sound is impermanent? Well, then it follows. No, if you believe sound is permanent, then it follows that sound is not a product because it's permanent. And so you put them in what's known as a two-horn dilemma. They don't want to accept that sound is not a product, but they want to continue in their belief that sound is permanent. So then you put them in this condition that if it's permanent, it must be not a product, like that. So that's the way consequences are often used. And then once you create that doubt in their mind, where they wonder whether or not sound is impermanent or whether it's permanent, then you would use the syllogism, sound is impermanent because it's a product, like that. So in the case of what's referred to as an autonomous syllogism, and that's what Bhavaveka uses in his commentary, and what Chandrakirti had an argument against the use of autonomous syllogisms. And an autonomous syllogism is where the opponent and the proponent are able to establish these three parts of a syllogism, and as well as the three criteria of the reason, they're able to establish it by their own valid cognition. Okay? They don't depend upon the other person's point of view. So each of them establish it independently of each other. Thus, it gets the name autonomous, an autonomous syllogism. Whereas the consequence, the proponent is using the view of the opponent in order to set up the consequence, right? So the opponent is somebody that believes sound is permanent, but they also believe that sound is a product. So then the consequence is, well, if sound is, it follows that sound is not a product because it's permanent. So that statement, the proponent is using the view of the opponent in order to set up the consequence and create a doubt in the opponent's mind. Okay, so Bhava Viveka said, consequences have their place to create a doubt in the opponent's mind regarding the thesis, which is to be proved. But it's not enough to prove the thesis in their mind. You have to have an autonomous syllogism to do it. And then it's firmly established. And Chandrakirti took exception to that. And like the tradition, my own teachers will say that, it may be the case that there are people that a consequence is not enough to prove to them that their view is wrong and to establish them in the right view. But there are people who are intelligent enough that if you set the consequence, then they'll understand what they didn't understand before. So you say to somebody that who's ripe, and you say, well, sound must be not a product because it's permanent. And they'll think about them. They say, wow, I know it's a product, so it must be impermanent because it can't be like that. So there are people that a consequence is sufficient to lead them to understand the thesis that the proponent wants to prove to them and to eliminate their wrong view. Okay? So, yeah. So that's kind of where the whole thing is happening, where Bhava Viveka criticized Buddhapalita. Chandrakirti thought that Buddhapalita was right on in his commentary to Nagarjuna's great treatise. And Bhava Viveka was a consummate scholar. But Chandrakirti saw this criticism that he made, and he thought, why does he believe that? Why does he think that an autonomous syllogism is necessary and that a consequence would not establish the correct view in the opponent's mind? And it led Chandrakirti to believe that Bhava Viveka did not fully understand Nagarjuna's teaching on the middle way, and that Chandrakirti accused Bhava Viveka of believing that that things did have inherent existence on the conventional level, not ultimately, but on the conventional level. And one of the reasons why he thought this was because when you're setting up the syllogism, if it's an autonomous syllogism, then both the opponent and the proponent have to identify each of the parts of the syllogism as well as the three criteria with valid cognition. And Chandrakirti understood that the opponent in this case would be somebody who believes that for something to exist, it has to inherently exist. Okay? It has to have this inherent nature to be able to exist. And so for them, the valid cognition that identifies the subject, so in our example, sound, that identifies what sound is, the valid cognition has to be free of mistakes. And when they see sound or perceive sound with their hearing like that, that sound would appear to their valid cognition exactly as it is. But from Chandrakirti's point of view, and this corresponds with Nagarjuna, that when conventional phenomena appear to the mind of an ordinary person, or to any person other than a Buddha or an Arya who is in meditative equipoise, when they're using ordinary consciousness, like the five sense consciousnesses or the ordinary mental consciousness, whether in thought or directly perceiving dreams or whatever, that all the objects of those consciousnesses, when they appear to be inherently existing. And therefore, those consciousnesses are mistaken. And in our first series of discussions, we discussed how Lama Tsongkhapa uses the term of valid cognition to establish even conventionalities. And so for Lama Tsongkhapa, the appearance of inherent existence to an ordinary consciousness does not prevent that ordinary consciousness from being a valid consciousness, so long as that consciousness is not adversely affected by causes of error. Causes of error would be like having an illness an eye illness that would cause floaters to appear, and so they see these things and they think there's something out there when in fact there's nothing out there. Or they could be in a train next to another train and the other train moves, but they think they're moving, or they're moving in something fast and they think the other thing's moving fast, or having taken some drug and hallucinating, or dreaming and thinking that the dream is a real object. Those are the causes of mistakenness that are typical examples, but that gives you the impression that we do have mistaken consciousnesses, but we also have consciousnesses that are free from mistake. And so those are considered to be valid cognitions like that, even though they're mistaken with regard to this appearance of inherent existence. So, but for Bhava Viveka, he follows this line of we have to be able to, us and the opponent have to be able to validly cognize this object. Okay, the subject, the predicate, the reason, the three criteria of the reason, all of these have to be validly cognized, and we do that by means of our own valid cognitions, not depending upon the other person's point of view, but if we all have to have the same valid cognitions in the sense of identifying the object with valid cognition. But for the opponent's point of view, to have a valid cognition has to be free from mistake. And that means free from the mistake of the appearance of inherent existence. And so to have an autonomous syllogism, then the proponent also has to have the same view, having a valid cognition of the subject, in our example, sound, and that there's no mistaken appearance arising. So based upon that, and Chandrakirti knows that that's the way Bhava Viveka thinks, because Bhava Viveka has clearly laid out the criteria for the proponent and the opponent to agree on what the subject is, because there are examples, even with respect to sound, from the point of view of the Buddhists, then sound is a product of the elements clashing together and whatever. But from the point of view of another school, sound is a quality of space. So if when you set up your syllogism, you restrict your subject to say like sound, which is a product of the elements, then your opponent may not agree. It says, I don't know any sound like that. Sound comes from space, not from the physical elements. So then your debate can't go any further, because you'd be talking about two different things. And then if you're trying to identify what kind of the validity of sound, where it is it a product of physical elements? Does it come up from space? Then you end up in a totally different discussion. It can take years, and then you have to come back again to the original. Do you still have a doubt whether it's impermanent or not? Like that. So you have to. So if Bhava Viveka agrees with that, but so he was saying that. So you can't restrict things like that, and also with those. And it's the same way with those pervasions. You can't restrict, confine the predicate of the thesis and the reason that proves the thesis. You can't restrict them. So in our example, the reason is product. The predicate is impermanent. So all products are impermanent. Is the forward provision. But if you narrow it down and say that, if you say that, let's say, sound, now let's use a different example. And this is also a well-known example. It won't be difficult to understand. So on the other side of the hill, there is fire because there is strongly billowing smoke. Okay? So wherever there is strongly billowing smoke, there must be fire, such as in my kitchen. Like that. So, like that. So, and the subject in this case is the other side of the hill. So that subject is chosen because it prevents you from actually seeing the fire, but you can see the effect of the fire, and you're using a reason which is an effect of your predicate of the thesis, and you know that that effect is not going to occur unless there's the cause. So strongly billowing smoke is not going to occur unless there's fire, right? So, but if you did something like, in my kitchen, there is a kitchen fire because there is kitchen smoke. Well, that makes it, that is difficult. That reasoning is difficult. And why is it difficult? The reason is because how are you going to perceive or cognize that forward provision on some example, which is not a kitchen? Because if you can't use the example of a kitchen because that's what you're trying to prove. And you have, and your opponent has to know the provision already before they can use the reason to establish this new thesis. Like on the other side of the hill, there is fire because there is smoke, like that. And if you restrict your reasoning, and then there's no way that you can have an example to gain an understanding or realization of that forward provision on ahead of time, like that. Okay. So this is the subject of logic. What is it called? Signs and reasons is a subject that is studied in the monastery early on, before they get into these major texts. Right now, we're studying a major text. But so they study these other points, like what makes up a syllogism, what are the different kinds of reasons, all of this kind of stuff. It's all studied ahead of time so that when they, like it's high school stuff, so that when they study a major treatise, like college subject, then it can be, they can enter into the more difficult aspects of it in a hurry. So go ahead, Bobby.
Can you like syllogisms and autonomous this and that? To me, in a way, they're just words. And I understand there's smoke, there's fire, but where is this all leading? It seems to me that you're talking about what rings true to me is you're saying that maybe Baba Viveka says that conventional reality from a valid cognizer is that which is permanent. And then Nagarjuna might say, okay, whatever is a product is dependent arising, and ultimately, if it's dependent arising, it's empty, it can't be truly existing. So where is what you're talking about right now get me to, okay, say dependent arising can't be truly existent, has to be empty. Help me get from what you're talking about now about syllogisms to that ultimate understanding.
Okay. So in the case of trying to understand emptiness, we have the syllogism, the person as the subject is empty of inherent existence. Empty of inherent existence is the predicate. The person is empty of inherent existence is the thesis. And the reason that proves it is the person is a dependent arising. Okay? So that would be the syllogism. And for a person, okay. So Buddhapalita might use a consequence in the form of it follows that the person is not a dependent arising because it inherently exists. Okay? that's a consequence in which he's using the opponent's belief that the person inherently exists, right? And he's put the person in what we refer to as in a dilemma, because they know that the person has to be a dependent arising. But if the person is inherently existing, then it can't be a dependent arising like that. So that's a consequence is then used from Bhava Viveka's point of view, is to create a doubt. And then you use the syllogism to firmly establish the thesis. Okay? And but Chandrakirti is noticing that that the kind of conditions that Bhava Viveka is speaking of leads Chandrakirti to believe that Bhava Viveka accepts that conventional objects inherently exist, at least on a conventional level. Not ultimately, he is a Madhyamika. He doesn't accept that things exist ultimately or truly existing, but but Chandrakirti believes that that Bhava Viveka is demonstrating through the use of autonomous syllogisms that inherent existence exists conventionally.
Okay, now to me, what you have to do is apply definitions. So if something is conventionally existing, then it is inherently existing. And so by that reasoning, if something is conventionally existing, it's permanent, and therefore it can't be the subject of causes and conditions or dependent arising.
Yeah.
So,
And we
so
did a
can
lot
you-
of that in the first 6 weeks.
so can you give me an example of something that's conventionally existing but is permanent?
Oh, for sure. For example, space as being a mere absence of obstruction to contact. It's not a product of anything. It is not the emptiness of inherent existence, so it's not the ultimate truth. It is considered a conventionality, a conventional truth. But we could also say that emptiness is conventionally existing because nothing ultimately exists. And emptiness too is permanent.
I go back to form is empty, emptiness is form. But that's just where my mind goes when you say that.
Yeah, well, but emptiness, when they say emptiness is form, it just means that it's not a different, it's a character, it's a quality of form, right?
Mhm.
It's not that that if you see form with your eyes, you're seeing emptiness.
The Buddha sees form with his eyes, he sees emptiness, doesn't he?
Yes, but it's when dealing with the Buddha, there's it's a whole different game. We have to, then you start dealing with the fact that Buddha sees both conventional reality and the ultimate emptiness of inherent existence. He sees them simultaneously, but it's said that he sees them with different consciousness, and yet to describe them as being different is a little difficult to do. And yet maybe, conceptually, we could do it just by, same entity, but different isolates. There's all kinds of ways of trying to talk about the Buddha's consciousness. But right now, and it will come up, periodically, how the Buddha sees things compared to how Aryas who are still on the learning path and ordinary beings who have not yet gained direct experience of emptiness like that. But the Buddha, somebody could say that, well, the Buddha sees, okay, the Buddha sees form with his ear consciousness and nose consciousness and so on, right? I mean, there's all kinds of, it's a complicated issue, Bob, if you bring that up.
Okay, here, the difficulty I have with talking about syllogisms and those things is I don't comprehend where it leads in terms of like how it deepens our understanding of dependent arising and emptiness.
Yeah,
And maybe,
well, the emptiness of inherent existence is said to be a difficult point to understand. That the inherent nature or inherent essence, this object which is being negated in the proof of emptiness, it's difficult to understand. So the distinction, the level of distinguishing the Svatantrika Madhyamika view of the object being negated and the Prasangika view of the object to be negated is very subtle. So by looking at this distinction of the Svatantrika and the Prasangika way of understanding emptiness is meant to help us understand what is to be negated in the proof of emptiness and develop confidence in that understanding.
maybe
That's what it's for.
maybe I just don't get the Svatantrika point of view, because it's a view that at least seems to be edging towards permanence. Maybe that's a mistake on my part.
Yeah, Bhava Viveka. Well, it's true that from the Prasangika arguments, well, in Nagarjuna's great treatise on the middle way, I think there's 27 chapters, and each one is dealing with a different kind of negation, and so we're accepting that there are impermanent things, but if something inherently exists, it can't be impermanent, right? And we've run into that already, right? And that's what you're saying, that if something inherently exists, it would have to be permanent. And agreed. But we're also trying to identify this appearance of inherent existence as it arises in our everyday experience. And not just the clear statements that we have memorized through hearing the teachings of the Dharma and are comfortable with. So, and in that case, some of this, subtle philosophy can be useful in like bringing up some something that we assumed was the case, and now we might have a doubt in it because of hearing these subtle distinctions. And otherwise, I could just go to the chapter on dealing with the example of the chariot,
Hmm.
and that would be great. And I tell you, this chapter 18 and 19, I have struggled with. And why is that? Because I too am a practical person, and I don't want to waste time trying to understand some wrong view that somebody else had and that I don't even have yet. Why should I learn their wrong view, knowing that it's going to be refuted by Lama Tsongkhapa, and then get back to the real meat of the issue, which I'm more interested in, is this ultimate analysis, which comes up in the example of the chariot, right? The 7-point analysis, as opposed to the 5-point analysis, as opposed to the 4-point analysis, like that. And that's why I definitely had to read ahead just to deal with my frustrations with chapter 18 and 19. But because it's part of the insight chapter of the Lamrim Chenmo, and our subject matter for this discussion group is the insight chapter of the Lamrim Chenmo, I think we're going to have to deal with it.
Okay, then can you explain one thing to me? How does Baba Viveka see conventional objects, the chariot, the car, the eye? Well, let's forget about the eye for a second. How does he see conventional objects as being permanent?
Yeah, well, I think for him, if that when we just speak on an everyday level about objects, that whatever the object is, like a computer, that that in order to be able to speak intelligently about something like a computer, that there has to be some quality of this object that is distinguished from all the various parts that make up the computer. So that when you're talking about the computer, you're not thinking, like screen, keyboard, motherboard, blah, 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 electricity, all these things. You're thinking of this one thing. And thus, and for people to be able to understand what you're talking about, they would also be understanding that there is this identity that is accepted on the conventional level for just interacting in an ordinary way. And but it can be, one can show with an ultimate analysis that it doesn't exist. But it does exist on the conventional level, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to take this collection of parts and view it as a single thing. It must have an intrinsic identity and to be able to have that oneness about it.
But to me, that's just like we use the example of the hand. It's got a thumb, a this, a that, this, a that. And, those parts have parts, add on infinitum. But to be able to function in the real world, we have to impute a label onto this.
Yes, so
which
the
I can-
Prasangika, I agree with you, Bob. The Prasangikas say that this oneness that is created by the mind through designation, imputation. But Baba Viveka from Chandrakirti's investigations is accepting that from the side of the object, on the conventional level, that there's the interaction of all of those parts is the hand, and it's not just through designation.
So there's a permanent hand.
Oh, he wouldn't say there was a permanent hand, of course, but Chandrakirti and the other Prasangikas would, in their position, they don't accept that even on the conventional level, there is inherent existence.
I will just be quiet. I'll try to shut my mouth.
It's all right.
Thank you, Pende. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting you.
It's all right. I run into the same frustration. So anyway, your homework, if you haven't already done it, is to study chapters 18 and 19. And then if that causes a lot of frustration, move on to 20 and 21. And because that's easier to understand, I think. And then we will know, what Chandrakirti and Lawrence Nakapa think of Bhavaviveka and his views, and the difference between Svatantrika Madhyamika and Prasangika Madhyamika, and their subtle distinctions. We're trying to get that. There's subtle distinctions. And this will, add confidence to our understanding of emptiness. And then later, when we get to, the analysis of the chariot, then we'll be back in familiar territory. But hopefully with a little more subtlety to our understanding, and that our understanding won't easily be, dismissed by or put in doubt by coming into contact with other points of view.
Can I ask one question? It always bothered me. Were these great scholars like Bhavaviveka, did they have a realization of emptiness, but the way they tried to explain things was just different than Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna, Lama Tsongkhapa? Or were they just, I don't know, do we know?
So far as I've heard, we don't know that Bhavaviveka had the correct view of emptiness, and his presentation was only done as a particular medicine for particular types of students that could be persuaded better with his presentation than another. There's no doubt that the Prasangika point of view is difficult. And that's probably why Chandrakirti, his understanding was not popular in India, in ancient India. So he lived when? He lived around the 6th century, something like that. And it wasn't until around the 10th century or so that his views became popular, because they were so difficult. They were just so difficult. And then Atisa brought it to Tibet. And before Atisha, when Shantarakshita arrived, he brought the Svatantrika Madhyamika point of view. And then when Atisha arrived, he brought the Prasangika view. So Svatantrika was already in existence in Tibet for a couple hundred years already before Atisha arrived. And then, if you look in the Nyingma tradition, my goodness, they don't like the idea that emptiness is the ultimate. They say, how can a mere negation of what never existed at all be the ultimate? They say that the ultimate is the Buddha nature that exists in our mind. And the Buddha nature that exists in our mind is fully enlightened already, but we just don't know it yet. That's what they say. And there's a lot of Nyingmapas out there. And they can, and Mipam Rinpoche was one of the great scholars of Tibet. And he studied all of Lama Tsongkhapa's works. Mipam died in the 20th century. So he studied all of Lama Tsongkhapa's stuff. He was a scholar, he was logical and everything, but he didn't fully accept everything that Lama Tsongkhapa said. And, you know, if we were sitting at his feet, he might change our mind unless we were really confident in our understanding.
Lama Yeshe said it was like cleaning a dirty mirror. So maybe he was a Nyingma.
Right. Okay, so we're done. We've gone past 8 o'clock, so we've done an introduction to chapter 18.
Can I please ask you to repeat the consequence offered for the syllogism on emptiness?
Oh, so that would be, it follows that the person is not a dependent arising because it inherently exists.
Okay. Because, okay. So that's what planted the doubt. The last part of it is what you did to plant the doubt.
That would plant a doubt. That's how a consequence is used. But for some people, that would be enough for them because they know that the person has to be a dependent arising. And so that may be enough to convince them that the person is empty of inherent existence.
Not enough.
And that's Chandrakirti's belief that
The consequence is not enough.
no, Chandrakirti's belief is that consequence can be enough.
Is enough. Okay.
And his belief also is that you can't use autonomous syllogisms to prove emptiness because it would require you and the opponent is somebody who doesn't believe in emptiness of inherent existence. It's not you can't use an autonomous syllogism because the way they see the subject and the way you as a Prasangika see or a Madhyamika see the subject are completely different. They see the subject as inherently existing, and the Madhyamika sees it as not inherently existing. And so you'd be talking about two different things. So in order to persuade this person to the correct view, you have to use their reasons instead of your own.
Yes. That's Chandrakirti.
Yeah,
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
sure. All right. So now I'm going to stop recording and hopefully see you all next week.
Thank you, Pende.
Thank you, Pende.
Thank you.